So, welcome to another episode of Trouble to Transformation. And today's guest, I have Dominic Johnson. He is a former D1 athlete in two different sports and a pro draft pick and basketball coach. And now he is a life coach to former athletes. Welcome, Dom. It's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, me too. Me too. When I first met you, we were on a team huddle with John Sterling and the gang, and you have an incredible story, Dom, and I really want to share that with my viewers. So we'll
Let's
get
do it.
started.
Hey, viewers.
Yeah, yeah. So, what two sports were you a D1 athlete?
I played football and basketball. Kind of the
Hmm.
typical, sports that people look at and they're like, I want to do those. Yeah, my dad played in the NFL, and I've kind of played football since I was like born. I've always kind of gravitated towards football, and then when I started to reach middle school, that's when I really started to fall in love with basketball. And I had some teachers that kind of got me into it,
Mm.
and I really started to pursue that. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, because that one photo that I'm going to use for our viewers for the video clips, you were in grade
hmm
3.
Yeah, I was young.
Wow, you started really
Yeah, that was
early.
actually that was a picture of me just like soccer, just like with a soccer ball on my foot. Um, but
Hmm.
yeah, no, I've always like even sports that you would look at me and you'd be like, "You did that?" I was like, "Yeah, like I did, rollerblading, ice skating, hockey. Like, hockey's huge in Canada, so I mean, everybody plays hockey
Yeah.
and skateboarding and
Mhm.
volleyball, everything in gym class. Like, I'm just soccer. I was really big into it. Anything that was a sport, I was just so like I needed to do it and I needed to try it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Because one thing I do know about your story, Dom, because you shared it in the last group that we were in together, is that you actually have experienced some very serious childhood adversity. Your mom was a single mom, raised how many boys? How many brothers?
Six total, including me.
Wow, that was a huge responsibility. So, did you want to just kind of touch on that a
Yeah.
little bit?
So I where do I go back? We as a family we started in Winnipeg and we moved to Brampton and we ended up in Cambridge, and that's kind of where things started to get pretty abusive in my household. Different struggles within my family. Looking back now, as I'm a little older, I can reflect on some things, and I can start to see kind of between the lines and realize some of the deeper issues that were going on that was causing some of these things. But at the time, you're a kid, and all you know is the abuse. All you know is the things that are happening to you. So it started to get very abusive, to the point where it was unsafe for my family to live there, and it was unsafe for my
Mm.
mom, and it was unsafe for us as boys, in terms of like being alive. And my mom made
Mm.
a decision. It's actually interesting. I was talking to her about this the other day. She's on the phone with one of her good friends, and I was sitting on the stairs, kind of close by, kind of like hearing the conversation. And she's talking about how like this is getting really bad. Like I don't know what we're gonna do, but we're gonna have to like leave somehow. I just don't know how we're gonna do it. I don't know when to do it. And I told my mom, I was like, if we're gonna leave, we have to leave right now. Because um, I have probably 20 plus siblings from multiple. My dad had multiple different baby moms, and so he would be
Mhm.
traveling around and seeing different kids and stuff like that. So oftentimes we were at home alone, for weeks at a time when it was just my mom and us boys. And I told my mom, I was like, if we're gonna leave, we have to leave right now. We have to just pack everything up and leave. And that's what we did. And we had a church community. We were very deeply in our church community, loved us, and we had some support during that time that was like life changing for us because we were homeless, and none of the shelters would take us in because our family was too big. And um, we have one of our church families was older, and sometimes they would go and take trips and stuff like that. So they decided to take a trip, an extra long trip, and let us stay in their house for a while until we could find some government housing. And so
Wow.
we by the grace of the powers that be, we found some government housing as a family. And about 3 months later, after kind of living in that house, we moved into government housing on Morning Calm. I have it tattooed on my arm, and that's where we
Hmm.
kind of started our journey um, as a family unit. Just my mom and us 6 boys, and yeah, I think that kind of explains the childhood a little bit. From there, my mom was in her bachelor's degree. She was studying at the University of Waterloo, and we were all kind of in our same schools that we went to. And she was searching for a law school to go to. That was one of her missions. Was she, never wanted to be in a situation like she was in and not know the laws and not be able to help
Hmm.
herself, or she wanted to help other women that were going through similar struggles. So um, we traveled around the country and looked for like 4 or 5, 6 different law schools that were like maybe on the fence about if they're going to offer her or not. All of them told her no because she has 6 kids and there's no way she's going to be able to do it. And she had one
Wow.
school that said that we'll let you and we believe in you and we'll accept you. And that was the University of Windsor. And that's where we ended up moving to. That's where my family's been ever since. And from there is when
Hmm.
kind of I started my personal journey, and my brothers have started their journeys. And now she's a full time lawyer practicing. She's has her own firm now, which is crazy. She worked her way up, and
Wow.
yeah, so that's kind of
That's
yeah.
incredible. Yeah, that's incredible. And one thing that really stood out to me, Dom, is like, the church groups having the support of other people of a community, right? Because, let's just face it, when you're in that adolescent era of your life, of human development, that's when you're forming your identity and secure attachment styles and whatnot. And and if you wouldn't have had that support, do you think your life would have been much different? Do you think you might have found yourself in trouble?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I don't know what I would have done. My mom's always been really supportive.
Hmm.
So my mom's always been supportive,
Hmm.
and then she was always very resourceful, and we always just she always just found a way. And I think I know I'm not perfect when it comes to attachment styles, um, but I
Hmm.
definitely think I would have ended up getting in more trouble, especially if my family had to split up, or my mom wasn't as resourceful, or we had to,
Hmm.
you know. But to be honest, our family did live in some pretty bad neighborhoods at times, and I think just by my mom's discernment and wisdom, I was able to stay out of trouble. And I think sports also kept me out of trouble because I was in some situations where I could have went one direction or the other, and my mom says it to me all the time. You could have gone down that road if you wanted to. Everybody in your neighborhood was like that. Your
Hmm.
friends at school, you tried your best, but the your environment was just set up for you to be like that. And I think it was from the
Yeah.
support of my mom and our church, and always keeping our heads on straight, is what kind of helped me stay
Yeah.
a little more stay
Yeah.
focused. So
Yeah, that's really excellent, Dom. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Because that's a very vulnerable part of your story. And, because even as a counselor, we look at so many different case studies. And when there's a single mom and there's lots of siblings and, and there's struggles, it's not uncommon for especially young boys that would have been your age at that time to get into
hmm
crime, and to get into trouble with the law and start becoming, there's violent tendencies and stuff. Like we see it all the time. So amazing story, surviving through
yeah,
adversity.
and I appreciate
Yeah.
it. It's my
Excellent.
mom too. She's really special, and I mean, she deserves a
Mhm.
whole podcast to herself. But I try to tell her to write a book, but she's busy. So one day she'll write one.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll
Yeah.
make that happen. Oh, I would be the first one to
Yeah.
rate it. Yeah, I think that's incredible. So now as far as getting into like say the basketball
Mhm.
coaching, had you already kind of played out your time with basketball and then you decided to become a coach, or what was the catalyst of becoming a coach?
Good question. So I had gone. So I was in college for 6 years, and when I tell that, people are like, "Wow, it's a long time." I had a redshirt year, and then I had the COVID year. Everybody got an extra year in school, and my fifth year of college,
Mhm.
I went through. Some people call it um, quarter life crisis. Some people call it a mental breakdown. Some people call it a spiritual awakening. Whatever you want to call it. That's kind of what I went through during my fifth year. And I was at home and I was really struggling with my mental health, and I started to question a lot of things about myself and question the path I was going. I started to see a lot of videos, and I started to read information and research things that took me down multiple different rabbit holes in different areas. And I was like, I started to rethink my path a little bit, and I started to think like, if I'm doing the actions right now, where will it get me in 25 years from now? I was playing football. I had two surgeries, multiple injuries, and you know I didn't want to end up like my dad did. I didn't want to end up in a similar
Mhm.
situation, and I didn't want to end up like some of the guys that I've seen gone to the NFL, and then they get done and they don't know what to do, and now they have these injuries that they've dealt with, and they have to live with these injuries, these concussions. It affects your brain, all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I was like, I called my coach and I said, I'm done. And they recruited me to come back. They said, come back one more year. We think you can play in the NFL. You can make a lot of money. You can do these things. And I kind of felt it inside of myself that I was done, but they really wanted me to come back. I was going to be a team captain, and was going to have a good year. And so I decided to come back for one more year, finish my master's, and our coaches ended up leaving to a different school.
Mhm.
And it was a really rough last year. I was a team captain. I did finish my master's, but I came down to the end of the year again, and I realized I feel the exact same way as I did a year ago. I want to be done. And
Mm.
all of my
Right.
coaches told me that I could be a good coach. My football coaches told me I could be a good coach. You know, I just knew within myself my dad was a coach. And um, I
Mhm.
personally, I tell everybody this, I personally didn't want to coach somebody else in football because of some of the injuries and some of the things that I did and some of the long term effects I know it has. I still love football. My brother
Mhm.
still plays football. He's probably going to get drafted in the next month or 2 months, whenever the draft
Mhm.
is. But I just didn't want to coach somebody else to do that. And I knew what kind of person I had to become in
Mhm.
order to be good at football. And I didn't want to coach somebody else to be that
Right.
person. So I got into coaching basketball. I felt
Mhm.
I love sports. I really love basketball. I can help people in this way.
Mhm.
And I did it for 2 years. I loved it. Alabama's like Coach Oates is one of the best in the country, one of the best, probably might go down as all time, continuing how he goes his career. But I realized as I was
Right.
there that I want to help people more with their life and less with their sport,
Mm.
less entertainment and more actual helping somebody with their life. And that's kind of
Mhm.
where I started to really get into the books and the self development and the learning and the journaling and
Yeah.
all the stuff that me and you are very passionate about. So, um,
Yes, for sure. We've definitely talked
yeah.
about a lot of that before. And one thing that I've been seeing on a lot of your social media lately is the identity part. Like, who am I after the sport? You make this major sacrifice to get to the level of playing that you got to, but then when it's all over, what I'm hearing from some of your posts is that the transition is not
Mm-hmm.
easy. So, and it's interesting, Don, because just recently I've been interviewing some ex law enforcement and ex military guys. And it's interesting because we've had the exact same conversation. Who am I after the
Yeah.
uniform? right? Because they're in a protector role, a caregiver role, and now they're kind of lost without that uniform. So I guess it makes no difference. You're wearing a sports jersey. It's the same uniform, right? So yeah, like let's do a deep dive into
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's absolutely it's the same. It's 100% the same. And at the nonprofit I work at, I was working with a guy, and um, he was in the army, and his identity was so deeply
Mm.
invested in the army to the point where his character was a certain way, and he was unwilling to take a look at his character and unwilling to take a look at some of his values and at least question them and not open minded to them, because this is the way he has to be. This is the way he was programmed to be. Hard nosed, treat people a certain way, talk to people a certain way, and it was hurting him in his career. It was hurting him in this real world where we have civilians that weren't in the army, and
Right.
yeah, it's just so important. Um, you know, I mean, we can go down. I feel like so much with this, but you know, our our identity. Like, I'm reading this book right now, and it's called Discovering Your Soul's Purpose. And they talk about Carl Jung and some of these other
Mm.
psychologists are talking about the difference between your personality and your identity. Sorry, and your individuality. And personality
Mhm.
being what you want the world to see, how you are, but that you expect others view you, and how you expect to be seen. And your individuality is underneath all those layers, underneath the mask that you go out and put on every day, who you really are at your core. And I think
Yes.
as you're going through this transition, you need to kind of take a long time to do deep work on yourself. And that can be in many
Yes.
ways, but it's all shedding that skin. Because as much as I was an athlete, as much as I tell everybody, oh, I did this, I did this, I did this, that's all in the past. And I am now a new version of myself now. And in order to
Mhm.
become a new version of yourself, and even more so, in order to find something new and then go down that path and be the best that you possibly can at that path, you need to be able
Mhm.
to let go of what was. And it's not that it wasn't
Mm.
a part of your
Yes.
story. It's just that
Mhm.
in order to focus on this thing, you need to let go of some of these old patterns and some of these old parts of
Yes.
you. So I get really passionate about it. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and you're speaking my language. I absolutely love Carl Jung. I mean that is like the foundation of all psychology, pretty much, and Sigmund Freud and all of that. And one thing too about Carl Jung, he talks about like the archetypes.
Mm.
And you probably know a little bit about the archetypes too, because that's part of our identity as well, is that we identify with some of those archetypes. And it's interesting because you can go anywhere in the world and not even speak the language, but we are going to identify and have something in common with other people due to the archetypes. However, there's the shadow
Mm.
side to the
Yep.
archetypes, and you talk about the caregiver. Well, the caregiver has that shadow side where, like, you need me. Like, I need you to need me so that I can take care of you. And then sometimes that will enable
Mm-hmm.
people to be stuck if you're around a caregiver archetype, and or they unintentionally, subconsciously attract people that are in need of a caregiver,
Yep.
so that we can still play those roles as the caregiver. So it's interesting. I love what you said. Now I have a
Mm-hmm.
question for you. So when you were going through your transformation, and if you ever read Stanislav Grof, oh, it's amazing. He's into the
Okay,
transpersonal
I'm gonna write this down.
psychology. Well, he's a psychiatrist. Yeah, he's a psychiatrist. But if you study him or read any of his literature, he will often reference Sigmund Freud and Carl
Okay.
Jung. Now, he has a book called the Stormy Search for the Self, where he talks about when you're going through that transformation, that sometimes it can almost be a spiritual
Ooh.
emergency
Okay.
versus an emergence. Now, in a spiritual emergency is that when you're kind of having that identity crisis and shedding those old layers of your old life, like you had mentioned, that sometimes it can be very jarring. It can be very jarring and it can really disrupt everything in your life because it's like, who am
Mm,
I?
yeah.
Now, did you ever go through a situation where it was like your whole reality just didn't even seem real anymore? Was there any like anxiety around
I
that?
mean, oh, there was so much that happened.
Where
Yeah,
to
I mean,
start, hey?
I almost just like got goosebumps as you said this to me because I remember specifically
Mhm.
I'm in a room and I'm always a person who is I'm always a person. We're about to go down a rabbit hole. I'm always a person who
That's
is
perfect.
structured
Let's
and
go.
disciplined, and I'm getting up and I'm working out, and this is what I'm doing. And during this time, my sleep schedule was completely flipped. I was staying up all night and I was sleeping during the day. And my brothers were like coming to the room asking me like, "Am I okay? What's wrong with me?" And they've never seen me like this before. And I was just in a very, very dark place. And everything around me was changing. My relationships were changing. I was trying to explain to people some of the things that I was seeing and what was going on, what I was reading, and nobody was understanding. Nobody around me was getting it. And there's times where there was times where I wanted to just not be here anymore. And that's when I realized like I need to go see a therapist and talk to
Mhm.
about some of the problems I'm going through. And everything was starting to change. Since that moment, everything in my life has changed. I had certain habits, I changed them. I listened to certain music, I changed it. I used to eat a certain kind of foods, I changed eating those kinds of foods. And ever since that moment, I've kind of been on a journey, and it's been a spiritual journey, and it's also been a self development journey, like in my actual reality. But yeah, in that moment, my whole reality changed. It almost didn't feel real. It
Yes.
was dark. I was a completely different person,
Mhm.
and it wasn't easy at all. And it was I've heard people
Yeah.
call it the dark night of the soul, and it's
Exactly.
that dark
Mhm.
time where you're shedding and
Yeah.
you're changing.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes when people go through these transformations, they will isolate themselves from friends, from family. And sometimes that's, a good thing, depending on if you actually really do need to shed some toxicity in your life. However, sometimes we can get that mixed up. And because of our internal shift, we want to shed everything in our life that we feel is, what's the word, like just not in alignment to our worldviews
Hmm.
anymore. So it can get a little bit confusing because we push away people that are actually important to us, that actually do care
Hmm.
about us. And then there's this difference of opinion just because we share different worldviews now. So I'm just wondering, did you kind of feel that you needed to get away from people, or did you actually need to get away from people?
Good question when you put it that way. Whatever I felt, I definitely got away from people. I was in a relationship, and
Mhm.
that relationship, like we tried to make it work, but it just didn't work out. We were just it was like magnets that are on the wrong side, and just like you can't. And
Mm. Yeah.
we ended up breaking up after a year, but like that was that relationship. All my friends that I used to have that used to do certain things, and I used to hang out with them in a certain way. I stopped hanging out with them, and
Mhm.
I feel like I had to exactly what you said. I had to get rid of everything. I had to get rid of all the habits. I had to
Yes.
get rid of all the people, and I definitely went into a time of complete isolation. And I truly feel like I'm in still that isolation, and I'm just now starting to
Mm.
get a little more comfortable, and I'm just now starting to get out a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, part of it is the isolation, and it's the working on yourself, and
Yeah.
it's kind of almost like
Mhm.
hiding yourself from the world because you don't know if the world's going to accept this new version of you, while you're changing and you're working
Ah,
on yourself.
yes.
And
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
kind of what I've been going through. But I'm starting to embrace it now, and I'm starting to get back out. But it's yeah, I
Hmm.
definitely have wiped a lot of the things in my life and a lot of the people, and
Hmm.
I've been in isolation.
Yeah. So I think that there also comes a time where we realize that all of these internal transformations, we can actually coexist with some of that external stuff. And yes, it is very important. People, places, and things. We can't heal in the environment that made us sick. Simple.
Mm-hmm.
Right. However, I was finding myself pushing away from everybody that just didn't share the same opinion or didn't share the same worldview. And that wasn't necessarily healthy
Mm-hmm.
either. So now what I've realized is that I can keep my spiritual transformations to
Yeah.
myself and talk about the woo woo to people that share the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because some people are just not, they're not buying it. Because when you go through this transformation, you want to get on rooftops and yell from
Mm-hmm.
rooftops. This is what I did, and these are the results, and this is what you
Mm-hmm.
need to do. However, it's not received well sometimes, right? So that for me, it was like it was creating like this division. I'm like, I can't hang out with you
Mm-hmm.
anymore. Like you don't believe in that, but that's not necessarily true. But I think in your case, what it sounded like though is there was an environment that you did need to remove yourself
For
from.
sure. And that was,
Yeah.
football was one of those environments.
Hmm.
Certain people around me that are, there's different kinds of connections that I've learned, karmic bonds, and
Hmm.
um, twin flames and soulmates and friends and everything. And
Yes.
I was in a karmic bond, and I realized that, and it was toxic. And the
Hmm.
version of me in that bond was toxic too. So, and I didn't want to
Mm.
be that anymore. I didn't really relate to that anymore. So I needed to get away from certain things. And yeah.
Yeah. What that's excellent self-awareness though. That is excellent self awareness, right? Because some people don't realize that they're just perpetuating the same patterns. As soon as they start doing the same things that they've always been doing. But I mean, the results don't
Hmm.
lie.
Yeah.
The results don't lie. Have a look at your life, and whatever's not working out for you is probably been not working out for you for a long
100%.
time.
Yep. And I often
Yeah.
like, even right now, I try to look around and be like, where am I not happy at? And how is it my fault? And
Mm,
it
yeah.
often is my fault. And I can try to blame these other circumstances. Whatever I don't like, I created, and now it's time to create something else.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, exactly. And the book that I recommended, I still want to send you that book. I have mine handy here. It's the Jack Canfield Success
ooh.
Principles. And I won't send you this one though. It's, but I mean, it's dog eared and tabbed multiple places. But the very first chapter in this book is taking 100% responsibility for your life. Everything good, everything bad. And yes, I get it. Bad things happen to good people. And that's not what I'm saying. Those are out of our control. However, our response to these things
Mm,
is our
yes.
responsibility. The accountability. How long do we want to suffer? How long do we want to keep repeating the same mistakes? Like maybe it was not being able to set healthy boundaries, not being able to say no, not acting on your
Mm,
intuition. You know what I mean? When you got the spidey senses, a lot of that stuff is within our control. So I really love that you have so much self awareness, right? We are responsible for everything in our
100%.
life.
That's key. And oh, I
Yeah.
wish I wish I
Mhm.
would have learned this sooner. And I'm now starting to learn it in this book that I'm reading. Is you can
Mhm.
control how you react to things. So it's just crazy when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
No situation that comes into your life is necessarily good or necessarily bad. It's just a situation that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started doing that, I started
Yes.
realizing, I started like just around the house, like my dog would do something and I'd be like, oh, I'd get annoyed. Or somebody at work would do something and I would be like, oh, I'm getting annoyed. And it's just funny, like when it comes to your subconscious, when it comes to creating things in your life, whatever you give an emotional reaction to, you know, some of these things will just create negative feelings in yourself and it might give you more of that negative situation. Same thing with if you give a
Absolutely.
positive reaction to something, you might get more positive energy come back to you. Like what you give is what's going to come back. And it hit me in this book when they described it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I've seen it multiple times, but you know, when you see it, but then you get it and it's different. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm right there with what you're saying, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. So what book is that,
This is
Dom?
this one right here. I know you had it on the script a little bit.
Oh, yeah, if you
If
can
you can
count to
count to four,
four.
this is really special. And I'll give you a little backstory on
Mm-hmm.
this. So, um, Tony Robbins
Please.
and Brian Tracy, I'm sure you're familiar with both of those people. Um,
Both of them. Love them.
speakers, coaches. So they both were mentored by Jim Rohn. And I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you're probably familiar with Jim Rohn. Um, and
Yes.
Jim Rohn's like one of my favorite guys to study. I try to watch and listen to everything that he puts out. Really good. I really like Jim Rohn.
Mm-hmm.
His mentor was Earl Shoaff, and Earl Shoaff, he died at
Mm.
49, but he's the one who mentored Jim Rohn in the beginning and taught him everything for 5 years. And Earl Shoaff's
Mm-hmm.
mentor was this man, James Breckenridge Jones. And
Mm.
James Breckenridge Jones is the furthest that I could possibly go back to find the original success principles, the original principles that have mentored all of these men down the line.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I've read a
Mm-hmm.
lot of books on manifestation. I've read a lot of books on like success and psychology, but this is the
Mm-hmm.
simplest definition and explanation of everything. And
Mm-hmm.
this has probably been one of the most transformative books I've ever read. And I know I'll read a really good book and then I'll tell people this is the best book I ever read. But this book right here, up to
Yeah.
date, this has been one of my favorite books ever. So I think if you read this, you would
Okay,
love
well,
it.
I'm gonna get that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get that because like even the Jack Canfield, he was like the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the
Mm.
Soul.
Oh, great book.
Yeah, and same thing. Like he was in The Secret, and he's also studied under exactly all of the names that you just said. Those are like the grandfathers of the success
Yeah.
principles, right? Yeah, so that's really amazing. And one thing about manifestation, visualization, mental rehearsal, affirmations, a lot of people will automatically think that that's woo woo,
Oh,
and I know, and this is what I'm really, really passionate about is bridging the gap between spirituality and the science, because I mean, they're starting to do that now with, like, say, Dr. Joe
mm-hmm.
Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden. They're always talking about, manifestation and energy and frequency and whatnot. But, like for our viewers, have you ever heard of the reticular
Mm-hmm.
activation system?
Yep.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
RAS.
I'm just,
Yeah. So just for our viewers, what that is, it's a bundle of nerves that sit in the brain stem that is actually responsible for, what is it, for arousal, for waking, for consciousness in a sense. However, what it does is it's like it acts like a guard. It acts like a filter, because at any given moment we have 11 million bits of information streaming through our consciousness, our subconsciousness at any given time. right? But we're not always going to be completely aware of it. Like right now, if I asked you, is your feet on tile, carpet, or linoleum, and you weren't thinking about that just a few seconds ago, but you
Mm-hmm.
are now. But your brain was always receiving that information. So what happens then with manifestation and positive affirmations and whatnot is that we put our goals to the forefront of our thinking. And then therefore the reticular activation system goes to work in order to make that
Mm-hmm.
happen. So for instance, if you were in the market to buy, like, just say a black Honda car, let's just say a
Mm-hmm.
Prelude. Now, all of a sudden, everywhere you go, you're going to see a black Honda
Mm-hmm.
Prelude, right? Without even thinking about it, it's just going to pop up. But not that it wasn't always there, but now your subconscious wants to make it
Yeah.
conscious.
100%.
So, and that's why affirmations are so powerful, and writing down your goals and, bringing that to the forefront of your thinking. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I love it. I think that when you see that Honda
Mhm.
and that's what you want, and you get clear on it, that is, it's a sign that it's coming to you. You know, I would take that as a sign
Mhm.
that it's on its way. You just have to trust it. I
Yes.
think that the
Yes.
people that view manifestation as woo woo is they might just not understand the language, and that's why I've been really passionate about
Mm.
finding the language that makes sense to them and taking my knowledge of
Mm.
the spiritual language of things and changing that knowledge so that it makes sense to them, and then they might be able to get it. So, for example, I'm in this book. You can count to four. They said, there's four steps, and in one of the steps, it talks about the power of taking action. Like, you need to take action, and you can get
Mhm.
going on your goal by getting a feeling first, and then that feeling will create that
Yes.
action. Or by taking action, you start to
Mhm.
get the feeling, and then that feeling causes you to take more
Yes.
action, and now you all of a sudden you're on a roll and you're going. And at Alabama,
Yes.
Coach
Exactly.
Oates would always say, if you're not playing the way you want to play, you got to get more reps. You just have to get more reps. Just get in the gym longer and just put more work in. You have to get more reps. So
Mhm.
some people,
Yeah.
depending on their level of understanding and their awareness, they might not understand,
Mhm.
like reticular activating system. They might not understand conscious mind, subconscious mind, but they will understand
Yes.
if I tell them, like, like if I ask them, what would that feel like to have that black Honda? What would it look like? Get a picture of
Mhm.
that and put that on your wall, and
Yes.
start to
Mhm.
take, how can you take action towards the black Honda? What do you need to do? How can you start
Mhm.
getting that going? And they might not understand the deep, scientific side, but they'll understand, I got to put this picture of this Honda on this wall. I have to, and
Yeah. Yeah.
when I see it out there, oh my gosh, I just saw it. It's coming. It's coming, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, I have I won't show you. I won't show you because the other half of my office is a bit of a mess. But I have a vision board on the wall, and I had created that vision board probably almost 5 years ago now. Now there's some items on there that didn't manifest
mhm.
yet, or maybe I need to like change the course a little bit. However, the one that really stuck out to me, that was actually the one that was on there the least, was how to interview people, podcasting.
Wow.
And here I am. Here I am 4 years later, 5 years later. Now I'm interviewing people. And I just realized that the other day I had like all the mics and all the lighting, studio
Mm,
lighting. And I've always wanted to be a public speaker. So I'm going to just kind of touch on like how, like you said, like really create that
mhm.
emotion so that you feel it, replace it with something greater than. I used to download like people clapping, like if it was in a auditorium or some sort of a
Yep.
conference, and then I would walk through the door and everybody would be clapping, and I'd be like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," and really embody that
Yeah. Yeah.
feeling,
That's so
right?
powerful.
So yeah, I love that because I did learn about that long time ago too. So I actually started to
Hmm.
practice it, and it also helps you kind of get over the nervousness
It does.
is because you've been there 1,000 times
100%.
before.
And it's interesting you
Yeah.
said there's some things on your vision board that haven't manifested. I have
Mhm.
gone through similar things, and I'm curious. I was like, why, why are some things manifest and some things different manifest? And I'm
Mhm.
studying this book, and I'm studying this Earl show, and
Mhm.
one thing that they're telling me that I'm going to start doing now is get very, very specific. And I realized I didn't give enough detail to some of these things. And as I'm writing out, they tell you to write out exactly what you want. And they give a funny example. They said, I want a Cadillac. He says, okay,
Mhm.
all right, any Cadillac? He said, yeah, well, I want a red Cadillac. All right, well, here, I'll give you this 20-year-old old version of a Cadillac. He said, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
I want a new
Yeah.
Cadillac,
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's like very, very,
Yeah.
very specific and detailed what you want, how you want to feel, like very detailed. And
Yeah.
that's one thing, I have felt that too. It's like, some things they manifest, and I look back and I look back at my notes, or I think back and I'm like, wait a second, I said I just want to be a life coach. I didn't say I wanted to be a certain life coach any direction. I just said I want to be a life coach, and this is where I am now, and I'm a life
Mhm.
coach. So if I don't like where I am, I
Yeah.
need to be more detailed about where I want to
Mhm.
be. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
so true because we like details. We have to have more details. And going back to Tony Robbins, there was where he did an experiment where he's like, "Hey, what do you want?" And he's like, "Well, I want more money. I want
Hmm.
more money." So Tony Robbins handed him $1. He's like, there's more money. Now get out of here. Right? Like be specific. And so I used to write myself a check, just like the Jim Carrey, how he used to write himself a check for $10 million. And, but you have to believe it.
Hmm.
You have to believe it. And some of the things that aren't manifesting on my vision board, I look at that now and I'm like, oh, I think I know why. Because they're not in alignment to my values.
Mm.
There was ego. There was a little bit of ego in the mix because what did I have on there was a Audi R8, like a $300,000
Yeah.
sports car. And now I look at my life and I'm like, well, would I want to drive a $300,000 sports car? Probably
Hmm.
not.
Yeah.
Like, would it be fun? Sure, it would be. But what purpose does that serve
Yeah.
for me? So I'm going to start making some
It's that
adjustments.
that that's really key. I did hear that every day as you go along this journey, as we go along this journey that we're on. Sometimes, some of the things that you wanted before are not some of the things you want now, and some things don't align with your values. And
Yeah.
I do think that it's really
Mhm.
important to hold your values over some of your goals or some of the things that you want once you start to realize what it might take for you to get those, or what you have to do to get them. You might want to come back on your values. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one thing that I saw on one of your Instagram posts was knowing your
Mm.
opponent. I really, really enjoyed that post. It was really good. So, what is your biggest opponent? Is it an inner opponent? Is it an external opponent? Let's dig into that a little bit.
Oh, I actually, coming back to Tony Robbins again. He had a 3-day seminar,
Hmm.
and I saw it on the third day of the seminar online, and he talked about internal opponents, external opponents, and intimate opponents. And external
Mm,
opponents being people around you, your environment,
yes.
maybe some of the things, just a part of your life right now that are kind of holding you back from where you want to be. Internal opponents, your thought
Yes.
process, your fears, your
Mm,
insecurities,
hmm.
and then your intimate opponents is like, for me, I had somebody that was really, really close to me, and they said something that was really discouraging, or I had a partner in business and they left, and that was really tough on me.
Mm.
And now that's an intimate opponent. So I also listened to another guy named Patrick Bet-David. He wrote a book called Choose Your Enemies Wisely, and it all kind of ties in
Oh.
together. He said there's three things that all of the greats have in common: the Michael Jordans, the Elon Musks. He said they all have somebody that loves them unconditionally. They all have
Mhm.
somebody that hurt them really, really badly, and then they all choose their enemies wisely. Kind of these opponents that we're talking about. And
Mhm.
for me personally, we already talked about my childhood a little bit. We talked about some of the things I've experienced growing up. And for me,
Mhm.
as I've done this deep work with the journaling, trying to figure out my purpose, my major misunderstanding, my major kind of intimate opponent that I'll always face is a deep rooted sense of not being enough, not not being good enough,
Ah,
not
yes.
and
Mhm.
I think that's you're a 3 on the Enneagram. I think
Yeah, I was just
I think
thinking that. Yeah, I was just
exactly, like it's
thinking.
it's what drives me. It's like
Mhm.
I want to practice my public speaking. I want to post content, but I didn't read 300, 400 books yet. I only read 150, so I'm not ready yet. Or,
Yeah,
I want to post this video, but I'm not good enough yet. I still have to do this. I'm not good enough yet. And it's the childhood, it's the experiences, and I think
yeah,
it kind of like the inner drive too. So I can look at it as a negative thing,
yes,
and I can let it like destroy me, or I can look at it and I can go, no, I'm doing it. I'm posting. No, I'm practicing speaking.
yeah,
I'm still gonna keep reading, but it's like that's not holding me back from. So that's kind of one
yeah.
thing. And me personally, I'm realizing, kind of like I said, I got to get more clear on like where I am, why I'm here, and where I really want to be.
Mhm.
And external opponent for me is an environment. Sometimes the environment that I'm in, I'm going
Yeah,
to use it to the best of my ability, but I also need to know that if I want to get somewhere different, I need to have a different environment. I need to have people around me that are like minded. And that's something,
yes,
whether this gets posted or not, that's something I don't have in my life right now. I have a couple of friends online,
yeah.
and I have people like you that I'm really grateful for that I can talk to on the podcast. But
Thank you.
in terms of
Yeah.
my environment, I'm going to have to change it because,
Mhm.
um, gosh, it
Yeah,
affects us in so many ways. I know you know
yeah.
the science behind it too. The
It
people you're
does.
around, and I mean,
Mhm.
I've even heard things to the point where, like, if you're around somebody so close, like on an energetic
Mhm.
level, your thought patterns start to like get in sync with theirs.
They will
Oh,
sink.
and
Mhm.
yeah.
Uh,
So I'm yeah.
yeah. You really do have to guard your energy. And you know one thing, Dom, I just I want you to normalize that. Normalize that you feel that way, right? Like because as a 3 Enneagram, I know exactly how you feel. Well, not exactly, but I
Hmm.
can relate, right? And we're very achievement based. And with being achievement based, we need that external validation. We need that, hey, you did a great job. I loved your video. Like there's so many times where I've recorded a podcast and the guest has been amazing. And I almost wanted to take it down because I was critiquing myself so bad, and the thing is, nobody else saw it but me. I worked with a coach long time ago, a life coach, and he was getting me out into the social media platform. And I would be like, take 40. And he would be like, post the video
Yeah.
already. And I'd be like, no, take 40, right? It was terrible. It was
Yeah.
debilitating. It was debilitating. And now I have to say it still
Hmm.
lingers. So it's okay. Just normalize that you do feel like that. But it's just, again, getting the reps in, posting, 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 posting. And from my point of view, your videos are great. I mean, I love them. I think that you're a very gifted speaker. So keep going.
I
Keep
appreciate it.
going.
I'm gonna keep doing it. It's been I
Mhm.
know my ex girlfriend. she was a therapist, and I've learned, from her,
Mhm.
been so grateful for her to learn how to love myself in a new way and doing some inner child
Yeah.
healing. And
Mm,
I think it's part of that process of like learning
mhm.
to know that you are enough, and not that you're going to
Yeah.
stop working
Yep.
hard, but it's just that to be confident when you do it. So I really appreciate it, though. I'm gonna, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Maybe we should do a challenge. 3 videos a week. I would say every day, but then time restraints. But
Yeah.
I love the video challenges. I've been on a few of them before where you're supposed to post every day for 30 days. I'm like, oh my God. And I actually backed out of it because I was debilitated with fear. I'm like, what am I even going to talk about? I'm like, well, just pick something. Well, I don't know what that is. I'm like, oh my God, seriously, just post
You would
something.
be surprised. Like, even just having this conversation with you, I can tell, like, you can tell when you're having a conversation with somebody, you can tell that they do a lot of reading. You can tell that they are really good. And like, I guarantee you, if you just start talking, ideas will just start coming to you. Like, if you just went on a story and you
Absolutely.
just started talking on the story, and as I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh shoot, like I want to listen to you, like I want to hear you more.
Thank
So
you.
even if
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
like a full setup post with the mic and everything, and it's just a story, I guarantee you, a lot of people. I mean, I'm like that too.
Yeah.
I just go on Instagram, swipe through a couple stories, maybe swipe
Mhm.
on the thing, and then I'm like, I gotta get off Instagram. I gotta focus. So yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and another thing too that I wanted to mention too is the comfort zone. Now, the comfort zone, because we've got these patterns that are,
Mm.
ingrained in us, that now if we start to come out of our comfort zone, there's that fear because it's the unknown, there's uncertainty. And I don't know if you're aware of a study that they did long time ago with salespeople, and it was about the comfort zone. Have you
Mm-mm.
ever heard about that study? So what they did, because the comfort zone acts like a thermostat, right? You set the thermostat in your home. So when the heat rises to a certain temperature, what happens? It shuts off.
Mm.
Well, our comfort zone is exactly the same thing. So what they did is they took two different groups of salespeople, and I'll just throw out some random numbers just for the sake of the conversation. But they had one group that was $3,000 a month. Then they had another group that was $10,000 a month. So what they found with the people that were making $3,000 a month, that if they didn't make their quota by mid-month, then the next half of that month, like the next 2 weeks of that month, they worked on the weekends, they worked overtime, and they did everything in their power to make sure that they hit that $3,000 mark. But what happened if they made the $3,000 mark in the first 2 weeks? Then they slacked off.
Gotcha.
Then they started slacking off because they had already made the $3,000
Hmm.
a month. So then they're like, oh, I can relax
Yeah.
now. I don't need to put in any extra work. So they had this internal thermometer that got to a certain temperature and then they
Yeah.
shut off.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. And then
Yeah. Well, and that's all in this book, Dom.
I need to get that book.
I'm going to send you this. I'm going to send it to you. I want to gift it to you. I already told you I was going to gift that to you because I think that honestly, this book should be in the hands of all life coaches, in my opinion.
Okay.
But
No, you know how I feel about reading, so you got me. You sold me.
yeah, yeah, some more self help
Oh
books,
yeah.
hey, for sure. So have you ever kind of like when you're coming out of your comfort zone, like just with what we're doing now with the posting and the public speaking, like let's face it, it's scary,
Hmm.
right? It's really scary because it's innate in us to want to make sure that we're not kicked out of our community or we're like it goes back to
Hmm.
tribal, right? We're not going to do anything that's going to get us kicked out of the tribe. So because without our tribe we're probably going to freeze to death, starve to death, and there won't be any
Hmm.
safety. So that's why they say public speaking is so terrifying, is because if we say something wrong or if we fail, then we're going to get booted off
Hmm.
stage. and then innately in us, that is probably one of the most terrifying thing is to be rejected by our
Yeah.
community.
I I think that's why I posted everything on TikTok first, and I didn't post on Instagram. And now I'm finally starting
Yeah.
to post stuff on Instagram. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I just I like last year I posted tweets, and I pretty much tweeted, and I wrote things, and I wrote my ideas, and then I would add pictures, and I realized I started to get a little bit of feedback, and then I would start now this year taking some of those ideas and speaking, and some people are like, all right, this is kind of good. I think you're good, and it's kind of been a slow build up, but you're absolutely right. Turn up the heat or get out of the kitchen, and it's time to turn up the heat. So
Yeah. Yeah. Turn up the heat. That's awesome. I love it. And a lot of people comment on some of my content as well. And it's really hard for me even to receive now. Like they're like, oh, that video was so good. And I'm like, it was okay. Because I'm just not even
mm,
used to it yet. But however, I've been at it for 3.5, 4 years. So my question to myself is, why haven't I booked that TED Talk yet? So I'm looking at bigger challenges
it's
now.
coming. It's coming.
It's terrifying.
That's
It's coming. It's
yes,
coming.
scary but
Yeah.
exciting.
So, let's talk about the nonprofit organization that you work for.
Yeah, well, it's a um, how do I say this in most simple terms? It's a transitional housing nonprofit in Uptown Chicago. I'm
Mhm.
in the building right now. I live in the building, um,
Mm,
and there's 7 rooms here, and we serve young men 18 to 35 who have been homeless in some capacity, and pretty much they move in. My goal is as a life coach is first that first baseline Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that shelter and security, so they get that first need met.
yes.
After that, it's kind of like a little bit of a boot camp, as Adam was explaining yesterday, where we're kind of getting them their grocery cards, their bus pass, all the other resources they need if they don't have a job. We're paying for their phone bill
Hmm.
and getting them work clothes, and we're having meetings weekly, pretty much meeting every day, getting their resume set, and working on getting them a job. Once they get a job, our whole goal is
Right.
to keep the job and budget and manage the money the best we can. Our goal as a nonprofit is to provide as much resource as we can so that they can save as much money as they can. And
Oh, interesting.
within the next 6 to 8 months, our goal is to have them saved up $5,000 to $6,000 so that they can move out to their own apartment. And
Hmm.
now they're in a better spot. They have a good community of people in the Chicago area. They worked on themselves with a life coach, and they have money, and they know how to budget their own money, and they have a job. So
Right.
that's kind of what I'm doing right now. It's very rewarding. There's also I'm seeing a lot of reasons why somebody can end up homeless. A lot of reasons why somebody can get into a certain spot, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot, especially to live in the building. It'd be a little different if I wasn't living here, but I do
Hmm.
enjoy it. I love it, and
Hmm.
I'm building something similar for athletes that I think is really helping along the lines of like transition. So hope that explains it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Oh, it totally does. And thank you for that. Yeah, that's incredible work. That's incredible work. And you did mention the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you're absolutely right. Like if safety and security is not priority, then all of the stuff on the top of that pyramid
Mm-hmm.
won't happen. Like it's incredibly difficult to, have prestige and self-esteem and accomplishments if your basic human needs are not being
Mm-hmm.
met. So, what an excellent organization. That's amazing.